The Americans openly declared that they want to establish a different political regime in Russia. This led to the current situation where the European Union is financing the war. Russia is also financing the war. There is a funding race going on between the two of us in which at the moment the Russians are ahead. This situation weakens them while we are stumbling into it.
Ha komolyan veszem a kérdést, akkor én két intézkedéssel beérném. Az első intézkedés az nem más, mint a tagállami és az uniós hatáskörök egyensúlyának a helyreállítása. Az elvett jogokat, amit a nemzetektől elvettek, az vissza kell adni. És a második intézkedés, ami egy borzalmasan bonyolult diplomáciai művelet lenne, hogy el kell kezdeni a koncentrikus körök Európájának megépítését. Első kör a biztonság köre. Itt még a törökök is elférnek, meg még az ukránok is elférnek. Ideértve az energiabiztonságot. Aztán a második a szabad mozgások köre. Egységes belső piac, vagyis gazdaság és Schengen. A harmadik a közös pénztárca köre, akinek eurója van. És a negyedik az alkotmányos intézmények köre. Aki Európa Egyesült Államokat akar, kicsibe, alkotmány, politikai uniót, ever closer, hát az menjen oda. De mi azt nem akarjuk, mi ahhoz a körhöz nem akarunk tartozni. Tehát ennek a koncentrikus körökből épülő Európának a megépítése az egyetlen esély, hogy megmentsük az Európai Uniót. Egyébként széthullik, dezintegrálódik, külső vonatkoztatási pontokhoz fog, mint a britek, kapcsolódni.
Ukraine is being divided up. The question was, what will happen to Ukraine? We talked about this a year ago. Today, if we look at the developments and understand with a cool head what is happening there, we have to say that Ukraine is being divided up right now. Before the war, Ukraine's situation was very clear. It existed as a buffer state in which the Russians had 50% influence and the West had the other 50%. There were occasional debates about this. One government would come, another would go, but no one questioned the fact that Ukraine was a territory situated between the West and Russia, a buffer state, and everyone felt safe as long as the Russians and the West each had roughly 50% influence. This was the situation up until the war. As a result of the war, this balance was disrupted. Exactly how it happened could be the topic of another lecture. The point is that this balance was broken. Today, Europeans elegantly talk about security guarantees, but in reality, these security guarantees mean the partition of Ukraine. The first step has already been taken because the West has accepted the existence of a Russian zone. The only debate is whether, beyond Crimea, there will be 2, 4, 5, or 6 regions. But there is no longer any discussion about whether it should exist at all. A Russian zone has already been established, which contains about 20% of Ukraine. This is already in the past. There is hardly any debate about it anymore. The debate is about how many kilometers from the border of the Russian zone a demilitarized zone should be created. 40 kilometers? 50, 100, 200? We don't know. This is ongoing right now. This will be the second zone. The result of the division of Ukraine will be a Russian zone, a demilitarized zone, and finally a Western zone, about the outlines and conditions of which we cannot say anything for certain yet, but we can see that Ukraine is transforming into a territory consisting of 3 zones. The leaders of the European Union believe that the most marketable, or at least the most easily acceptable goal in Western Europe for joint indebtedness, one for which it is possible to take on massive amounts of debt, is the Ukrainian war itself, or rather its security. Or they want to create massive indebtedness for all of us under this pretext. In our view as Hungarians, and in my opinion, this is definitely a mistake. Because Ukraine's membership in the European Union, which is the inevitable consequence of this joint indebtedness, since we are letting the Ukrainians in, means that we don't have the money to help the Ukrainians catch up to the EU average. To do that, we have to take out loans. So they think that Ukrainian membership, the war and Ukrainian membership will create joint debt. But in reality, Ukrainian membership will drag the European Union into the war, because we can't imagine a situation where the EU has member states and one of those member states is attacked from outside or gets into a border conflict like what is happening now on the Russian-Ukrainian border. It's impossible that in such a situation, the other EU member states would not rush to help the one that is under military attack. However, whether Ukraine is under military attack, whether Ukraine is in conflict with Russia, will never be decided by Ukraine, but always by Russia. And then we are already in the war. So, in my opinion, the Europeans are mistaken. Ukraine's EU membership, whether indirectly or directly, will inevitably drag us into the war. On top of that, we don't even have any money. I just mentioned the numbers, how the performance of the Union has declined. We don't even have enough money to restore our own competitiveness. And then the money we do have, we want to send to Ukraine. So we are ruining the European Union economically as well. In reality, Europe shouldn't be knocking on doors in Washington, but should go to Moscow and conclude a European Union-Russia security agreement, not just about Ukraine, but a European Union-Russia security agreement, which would obviously include that Ukraine will not become a member of either NATO or the European Union. But it could include, and I think Hungary could support this, a strategic cooperation agreement between Ukraine and the European Union. We don't want to throw the Ukrainians out into nothing. We are not anti-Ukrainian. The European Union cannot open up towards China and India as long as the war continues, because the war is the point of reference. Accusing China and India of buying Russian energy and thereby financing the war. This excludes the possibility of concluding an economic cooperation agreement with these countries at the same time. So in summary, what I want to say is that continuing the war is a losing European strategy.